Hello there, Hourlings, and welcome back to After Hours with Jimmy Thistle. Today we have Thea, and Thea is it's a bit different this week because Thea is the Chief Operating Officer for Motiv8 Addiction Services, which is a charity been going since the 70s on the Isle of Man that was very much critical for me in getting sober for that final time. And, they've just been amazing in my, journey. And Thea obviously has been instrumental in all of that. We have known each other now for nearly 5 years, and I'd say we're pretty close. We get on. We have a good laugh, but also we kind of deal with the serious stuff. Thea was instrumental in helping set up the peer mentor program, which I'm now part of. I've finished my training. Thea was pretty much there throughout the entirety of the training. So just kind of displacing her training, her skills, her mindset onto us as peer mentors as well. So Thea's a kind of tour de force in the recovery world, essentially on the Isle of Man and wider afield. She has just completed a book called Memoirs of an Addiction Counsellor. Just got the name right there. And so it was I just wanted to get someone in from, still in the recovery world, but not so much in recovery herself. She has had family members that have gone through addictions, which we touch upon in the conversation. So it was really just to kind of try and get someone from a different background, a different kind of look towards the kind of addiction and recovery world. So I think we've got that in the conversation with Thea. It's an amazing little chat that we have. So I hope it kind of sheds some light on people that are entering into this world or already in this world. So Motiv8, as I say, are just a fantastic charity on the Isle of Man, and I just think there should be more of this kind of thing on the UK across the board, because there's not really, from my experience, that good a charity that is really just for people in recovery in the UK. I'm sure there are, but I didn't come across them until I came over here. So we're very lucky and blessed. And as I say, it's a great conversation. So here's Thea. Hi Thea. Welcome to After Hours with Jimmy Thistle. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm actually just home from work. Finish at 8 o'clock, so just got sat down, cup of tea in hand.
And then you're stuck on a Zoom chat with me, so you'll be wanting to just kind of relax for the evening. So Thea, as I say, it's kind of my podcast is obviously I've had every episode on here has been people in recovery, but you're a bit different because you are kind of one of the key figures at Motiv8 Addiction Services on the Isle of Man. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about your history and how you got into that kind of business and when you what helped set up Motiv8 and what it was originally, because it wasn't always called Motiv8, was it?
No, it wasn't. Okay, so there's two strands there. So let me tell you first of all about Motiv8.
Mm-hmm.
It was founded as a charity in 1978 on the island, and its first name was the Isle of Man Council on Alcoholism. So over time, it's changed its name because it's taken on board supporting people who've got drug problems, gambling, gaming. So it couldn't stay as that original name format. So it's evolved into an all-encompassing service to help people with a variety of problems.
Sure.
I started working for the charity in 1992.
Mm-hmm.
I started off as an apprentice counsellor, very small at that time, in a little office in Douglas,
Mm-hmm.
a a shop in Market Hill, right in the thick of all the pubs of Douglas.
Great place for it. Yeah.
It was, yeah. Well, it actually was, because sometimes the landlady from the pub around the corner used to bring people around and say, "I've got another one for you." So, um, yeah. So I started in 1992, and it really was an apprenticeship, really. Learnt my craft by my mentor. The
Hmm.
person that inspired me the most was a lady called Joan Clegg, sadly passed away now.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I haven't always been with Motiv8. I did leave for a couple of years and went to work in the statutory services,
Hmm.
actually after I lost Joan, but came back a couple of years later when the position for the director became available, and I thought, let's just do it. Let's just go for it. Um, why did I start working in this field? I kind of come upon it by chance, really.
Okay.
Uh, I was working with vulnerable children in care, and I was doing shifts, and it was hard because I had a young family myself. And
Hmm.
I saw this opportunity come up, and it was a day job, if you like. So I applied, and I was successful, and I kind of it was purely by accident, but when I got into the job, I realized that I knew this work very, very well, because I came from a family where there was an alcohol problem.
Right. Right.
Brought up in a family where my dad had a serious binge drinking issue,
Hmm.
and under the influence of alcohol, he changed character, and he wasn't a very nice man. And I spent a lot of time in my childhood not going home, staying out, waiting for my mum to come home rather than be at home with him, because he could be quite nasty under the influence.
Hmm.
So, but that wasn't his true nature. His true nature was a very gentle soul, very caring, would do anything for anybody. But he had PTSD from his years in the war when he was torpedoed. He'd
Yeah.
signed up at 15. He'd seen it all, and
Yeah.
he came back to the island with there was no therapy in those days, so
No.
you got your therapy in the local pub. So that was his backstory. So, but obviously it impacted our family life growing up. So I also had grandparents who were fond of alcohol. I
Hmm.
was steering them to pubs at about the age of 8, wandering the streets. So I was steering people with alcohol problems from a very young age.
Yeah, you
So
were schooled in it from an early age. Yeah.
yeah, so I ended up when I got into the work, I recognized it instantly.
Hmm.
Um, and and when I understood what it was like for a child growing up, when I started to see these stories being recounted from other people, as they're in their childhood, it was
Hmm.
just, kind of like, oh my goodness, that was my experience. So, yeah. But then again, I'm not unique. So many people, in our culture, British culture, Northwest culture,
Yeah.
we did knocking on the door of the pub, wondering when your dad was going to come home,
Yeah.
latchkey kids. I'm not young anymore. So I,
No, but I mean, even my generation, it was the same thing, and it was what was kind of that was the pastime that people did. That was the kind of social hub of the
yeah,
villages or the towns. It was where decisions were made and people would meet up, and that, as you say, the husband would come home and maybe give the wife the kind of money for the week and pay the rent or the mortgage or whatever, and then it would be down the pub. But at least I suppose you got to see, like you said there, that your dad wasn't the same person when he drank, so you were getting to see what your dad was really like, but then you knew that he would
yeah.
change, so it's kind of, at least you could still hold on to that kind of part of it, I guess. Yeah.
And he improved as he got older. Obviously his body probably couldn't do it so much anymore, but he improved, didn't drink quite as much,
Yeah.
resolved some of his inner demons, I think.
Hmm.
Um, Settled into it more, but there was a period of time in my childhood growing up where it wasn't very nice. But as I say, it belied his true character, because he actually would do anything for anybody.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And think you'll know this probably better than me. There's Nicoa in the UK now, which is it's a charity set up for children of adults that have an alcohol problem. I can't remember the exact acronym and what it's for, but it's
Dad fam as well, which is again for family members.
yeah, yeah. So there's
Absolutely fine. addictive behaviors. So,
Yeah. And
um,
obviously Motivate itself has a similar.
so it has a lovely family service. It's just a little gem of a service at Motiv8, with a great little team of people there who
Yeah.
support children impacted,
Yeah.
gives them voice, advocates for them, um, gives them a safe space to talk about how it is for them, and it would have been something as a child that if I could have had, I would have, really benefited from. So that's how I see it.
Hmm.
It's an integral part of the work that we do. We're very holistic. We see the family, not the individual. It's like what I always say, it's like watching a play or a film and having characters missing from it if you don't get to see the other side of the story, what it's like for the family.
Absolutely. No, that's a great way of thinking it. And I think it is great because, a lot of people, like back in the day when we didn't have all these services available, and there's still not enough, but we are getting there, I think slowly but surely. And obviously at the Isle of Man, we are a smaller place, but we seem to be have more services available than some of the bigger towns over in the UK and things like that.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
what I think. Yeah, I think we are more accessible. What we
hmm
have, people aren't waiting as long to be seen. There is support there. Yourself. There are meetings that people can go to most days of the week now. You know,
Yeah,
um, access one to one quite quickly as well. So, it's much improved for
yeah.
sure. Mm.
And I think that's the worry sometimes that when there are children growing up in a kind of alcohol fueled or drug fueled kind of environment, it can kind of turn them onto that as well because they see that as normalized behavior, and then
Mm.
they think, well, as soon as I can, or even before I'm allowed to drink, I'm going to start drinking or using, and that can be, obviously a detrimental effect on their lives. So,
Oh, for sure. There's research that says this as well. If it as a young person, or
mhm,
even into your sort of teens and your early youth, you always vow never to turn out like your parents.
yeah,
But actually, if you did see your parent turn to a substance in times of trouble, in times of trauma, then
mhm,
it's a script that you can follow too.
yeah,
So, there is some research that says this, that it
mhm,
does make you more vulnerable.
yeah. And then the flip side of that as well, there's the whole just normalizing, alcohol
Yeah.
use, and it's like because they see their parents and friends of their parents coming round, and oh, we're having a nice meal with our friends, and this is what we do. It's glamorizing it, and it is, and I think we kind of. I don't know what your thoughts are, but mine, it's kind of the culture needs to kind of change a little bit on that because we are becoming more health conscious as we're kind of growing as nations of the world, and we need to start kind of looking towards what are the key aspects. Because if you go, like, I was talking to a friend the other day, and it's not so bad over here because we feel safer over here. We definitely do. We go out on a Friday, Saturday night, and it's fine. But in the UK, there's no way I'd want to go to certain places, after dark for a meal. I'd want to be out of the town centre by 10 o'clock because I'm not in that environment anymore. When you're in it and you're drinking, you feel invincible, so you're okay and you deal with it. But now that I'm sober, I want to be back out and home before any of the kind of trouble starts.
That kind of safe environment that we think the Isle of Man is
Mm,
makes it more risky, makes it more risky for our children because we think our kids are not going to come to any harm here. So we let them stay out more. They obviously have more dispensable income here, probably because of better standard of living. So
yeah,
that means that they are more likely to get exposed to things that they maybe wouldn't have done if you lived in London because you wouldn't have let them out at night,
this
to
is
go
very
down the
true.
park and play. So we have that kind of freedom that actually becomes a risk factor,
Yeah.
to be exposed to drugs, to be exposed to. It's more likely to be drugs today. When I first started out in my career, we were more worried about alcopops and things like that.
Uh-huh.
You know, that was the era of alcopops, and we used to get hundreds of referrals for kids, who were consumed on street corners,
Yeah.
with frosty jacks and things like that. But
Hooch
now,
and all that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
now it's more likely to be exposed to drugs. Um,
So
you know,
then I was going to ask you, so what is the kind of main like service users that you see coming through, what would be the kind of main substance that is the biggest issue with Motivate at the moment? And I'm
Honestly,
including alcohol in that obviously as well.
always it's still alcohol.
Still alcohol, right,
Still
right.
alcohol. It's insidious. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
last
it's
year,
legal. That's the thing. It's legal. So you can just
yeah,
go into a shop and buy it at any time of day
yeah,
now. Yeah.
yeah. And I can't really see that changing anytime soon. It's ever been thus. So probably, I'm sort of going towards the end of my career now,
Mm,
but it's ever been thus, and so I don't see it changing a great deal. I have seen it changing slightly with younger people,
hmm
that they're not drinking quite as much, but they're more likely maybe to turn, if they are going to turn to something, to turn to cannabis
hmm
or other substances. So but you know, the generation past 30, I'd say, and particularly the older generation, they're drinking far more than they should be
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
That is the biggest increase in drinking age group is the over 50s,
Right. Okay.
more than anybody. And
And that's an increase because the thing is, like I'm 45 now, so my generation is kind of like growing up in the 90s when we were kind of teenagers, early 20s and things. And I still see my lot drinking. And obviously, if I hadn't got sober and I maybe had if I could moderate, then I'd probably still be out doing it because it's almost like we don't want the party to end, and that's all we've kind of known. So I still
Mm.
see my friends going out and still binging it on the weekends, and I just think you're not 20 anymore. This is going to have a detrimental
Yes.
effect on you at some point, and
And it
that's
does. Your A&E is full of people who've had, an accident, drink-related injury,
yeah,
fall off the pavement. Elderly people have falls as a
yeah.
result of their drinking. They're starting to see the impact on their liver, on their blood pressure, on their heart. You can't keep supping wine to the extent that you could when you were younger and not show the detriment to it. It catches up with you.
It does, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think, I mean, in my research, the jury's still out on what can kind of why, likes of my brother and me, growing up in the same environment, same parents, same like DNA. How did I get into such a situation with alcohol, and he didn't? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like how, and my thoughts, like the more you do of an addictive substance, the more likely you are to have a kind of dependency on it. So I think, my brother likes a drink. He still does, but he's obviously calmed it down because he's not getting any younger. But I think the more longevity you have with a substance, especially alcohol, it can become addictive.
Well, that's the current science on it as well.
Yeah. Okay.
We've talked about this, haven't we? In the
Yeah.
training, the current science on addiction, it's all about the adaptation in the brain.
hmm
It's all about how the reward pathway in the brain gets rather used to it if you keep doing it,
Yeah.
and it starts to become dominant in the brain, and it loses its ability to take your thinking pattern to the consequences. If I do this, this will happen.
hmm
That it becomes like a slippery slope, really. It's right to the reward pathway, slippery slide, and it goes straight there, and you forget about the consequences that they don't come into it. And that's what the current science is saying. It's dopamine. Your dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter in the brain,
hmm
you get lots and lots of it the more you do it, but then you start to wear it out, and then you need to have more of it to get that dopamine again. So it's all very scientific. So I'm glad that the theories are going that way now, and more people are understanding it, because we're losing this. The alcoholic, is weak-willed, is doing this to themselves. Choosing this.
You're
This
not
is
drinking properly. You don't know how to do it. That's why you're in a slump over a park bench. It's like, no, they've just, there is science behind it. They've obviously had
have a
some.
couple, you'll be fine, and then you
Yeah,
go home.
yeah. And
But
and I fell into that trap as well. I think because I was maybe going to the bar for my round and I was having a few shots or whatever each time, so I'd be more drunk at the end of the night. And
Mm,
people were like, "Well, he obviously can't handle his booze," but they hadn't. understood that I'd been drinking twice as much as them. So
Yes,
that's
oh,
why I was in that state. But I could still stand, that was the thing with me. I would never,
see,
just think, right, I need to go home. And that was where my kind of downfall was, the fact that there was no off button, and
yeah,
it's scary. And I just keep seeing more and more people like that. But there was one lady I was speaking to well, it was last year, and she would only have a bottle of Prosecco to herself on a Friday night. She had kids, so she wouldn't be going out or anything like that. And okay, that was quite a lot because she was quite little, but she wouldn't drink at all through the week. And if it got to a Friday night and there was something else on and she couldn't have that bottle of Prosecco, she noticed that she started getting quite, kind of antsy. And I said, well, because, in a slightly small way, your body is, it's dependent on that on a Friday night. Your body's like, where's that? Why am I not getting that in my system? You
yeah.
know?
Became a creature of habit, really. And if that, like some people, if they don't keep to their routine, they can just get kind of,
Yeah.
that was what she looked forward to, her downtime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not to drink in one session, though, particularly for a petite person, because,
It is, yeah. And
yeah,
I'm not sure if she would finish it.
dependent, yeah, but you could
Yeah.
fall down the stairs on your way to bed or
Well,
something.
this is it. And as I say,
Yeah,
with having children as well, you've got to be aware of being able to,
yeah,
watch them. And that was always a thing for me. It was like I had an ex who wouldn't really drink, and I was like, why are you not, imbibing? And it's like, well, if the little man needs to go to the hospital, then I want to be. And I was
yeah,
like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
And so, what do you see kind of being the biggest problem in the next 5 to 10 years? And I'm including all the substances. I mean, do you think alcohol is kind of on a decline with the younger
So
ones?
this is why I love the subject, because
Yeah.
it's so fascinating, and you never know where it's going to go. I mean, I pray that things like nitazines and fentanyl and these synthetic opiates don't find their way to our shores, because
Yeah.
they kill, and we would have a spate of drug-related deaths. And that would be awful. That would be so tragic. So, this is like the opioid crisis in America, and the backstory to that is really quite interesting, but very tragic.
Hmm.
How these big companies had created these drugs, and they got the
The
in America,
Sacklers.
yeah, basically the Sackler
Hmm.
family. Is it Sackler? I can't remember. I've seen a few programs on it, but
Hmm.
they got their drugs approved by the FDA as being not as addictive, non-addictive, but they were opiates.
Hmm.
And they created a demand for opiates by prescribing these. And then when they took them away, they created this demand for illicit opiates. And then they all flood in now from China and other places like that. And that was how the opioid crisis came about. So if it came here, that would be really, really worrying. I think that alcohol will always be there certainly for the next 10 to 20 years.
Right.
Um, it's always going to be a drug of choice because it's legal.
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
high and it's legal, so I think you're going to see, because we've already started that process, the decriminalization of cannabis.
Hmm.
But it doesn't necessarily mean, there's no research that says that because a drug is available that everyone will suddenly become pot smokers. It doesn't work like that. It may A few more might pick it up because they can.
Yeah.
Now, only tobacco is legal. Do you smoke?
No.
I don't smoke. I
No.
used
I
It's
used
legal,
to. I used to, but
yeah, but you don't.
I
So it
don't.
doesn't mean we're all going to do it.
No. And
But
I
you never
think,
know what drug's going to come next.
well, I mean, there's all these different, like you said, they're all coming in from China, the opioids, but the opiates. But I was speaking to another person, in the groups, and this was going back like, nearly 5 years ago, and he was getting lots of psychedelics shipped to the Isle of Man from
Mm,
places like China or wherever, and they were all synthetic, but they were just these different types of psychedelics. So there is obviously the chance of overdose, but I think with psychedelics, you only need a tiny drop, and then you're away on a trip for however many hours. But he didn't know what he was getting most of the time. It was just like trial and error. And I just think that's worrying because you're buying them black
yeah.
market, dark web, and it's like you don't know what you're getting. So where's that going to go?
So, I mean, what another sort of cause concern at the moment is ketamine.
Hmm.
And ketamine, even though it has such a toxic effect
Yeah.
on the body, you've got young people who have no bladders.
Yeah.
Their bladders have been destroyed, and that's a growing concern. Um, there's just you never know what drug is going to appear. That's what I mean. This is why I kind of like the subject in kind of a morbid way, in a sense, because
Mhm.
just to keep an eye out for what are the trends and what is happening.
Well, it's
Trying to
kind of
keep.
good detective work, isn't it? I mean, I never really got interested in. I mean, I tried ketamine, but it never really did it for me. It was more. I always went back to booze. Really, the only time I ever took cocaine was so that I could drink more. That was kind of it. I was too. I didn't want to spend the money on the cocaine. It was too expensive. But ketamine never really did it for me. But it was only until doing the training for the peer mentoring that I found out about that, the bladder issues with ketamine, and that's just scary because nobody knows about that. Nobody really knows
Mm,
until it, I suppose, happens to them.
yeah. So there are reports of urology departments in England that are dealing with increasing numbers
Hmm.
of who have got damage. They call it ket bladder.
Ket bladder.
Yeah.
And is it just
And
prolonged use that causes that, or?
uh, um, I don't know how it causes it and the mechanisms that are involved. I'm not a medical person, but
Sure.
it is a phenomena that has been noticed.
Yeah.
Um, and
But like you
prescription,
say, it's the young
well,
people, so it's not someone that's been doing ketamine for 40 years. It's someone that's still maybe in their
quite
20s and they've
young,
been doing it
yeah. They haven't
five.
got a very long habit with it, and they're starting to develop these serious complications as a result of their use. And prescription drugs as well. You know, there are some prescription drugs that are very Moorish, for want of a better word.
Mhm.
And there's a trade in them, and they're coming in through the black market as well. And we have quite a usage of it locally as well. Of prescription drugs, over misuse of prescription drugs. So
Yeah. And I
we're
think there's
not
a
immune
lot of
to
people
the
that
problems.
know how to. Sorry, go on.
We're not immune to the problems that you hear about in large towns and cities.
Of course, yeah, yeah. It is. I mean, and as I'm, getting to know by doing the peer mentoring, it is still, a kind of obviously a major issue over here. And I think a lot of people know how to work the system, as it were. They need to go to their consultant or a doctor or whatever and put on the sob story, and then they can get the prescription. So they're not even having to go through the black market, as it were, to get them. So it's
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that will
And
toughen up time.
and then there's the obviously the crime aspect with it as well.
Yeah.
There's
So
that's
we have seen that increase with organised crime groups targeting the Isle of Man, targeting people here who then, if you get involved in that, then they look for younger people that they can, who are vulnerable, and they can, maybe use them as kind of mules, really,
yeah.
foot soldiers to do the frontline work so that they don't expose themselves to the criminality. So we
Mm.
have seen that come to our shores. I mean, we had Operation Nightjar last year, which saw quite young people who ended up, in the criminal justice system who you wouldn't expect,
Hmm.
uh, you know, who've come from, good stock, good families, good backgrounds. Families are absolutely devastated that this has happened. Um,
And
but
that's
they
on their record now. That's it. I suppose it's like the county lines almost in a way that these young people are
their own
taking
version of
off.
county lines,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you've got that as well. Now, who'd have thought that all that would have come to our shores? But I suppose we look like we are a wealthy island to, certain inner city places, so that we could pretend they see us as being rich pickings.
Mm. Yeah, and it's sad because we do want to be a bit of a paradise over here, but it's we still have the same issues that they do across and things like that. And do you think the government's doing enough to help you guys and combat the issues that we've got over here?
Well, let's look at it from another perspective. It wouldn't happen if there wasn't a demand.
That's
There will
true.
always be a demand
Yeah.
for substances. So I personally think that how we deal with it, and this I'm speaking for me personally, this is not motivates for you.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
We rethink how we deal with it because there will always be a demand for drugs. And as I
Mhm.
said, even though maybe some drugs are legal, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're all going to go out and start using crack or,
No.
or cannabis. We're not all to do it.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to rethink it, about how, because at the moment this trade exists in the criminal underworld.
Yeah.
Um, and we've already started the process of the legalization of, medicinal cannabis.
Hmm.
I suppose the next step is to put it, out there for, more use, community
Hmm.
use, less criminality is attached to it. Um, and some countries where they have legalized substances, have taken it out of the hands of the criminals,
Hmm.
and people who want to use it can do it safely without the fear of being criminalized. So, as I say, I'm speaking for myself personally, but I do think that lots should be legal
Yeah.
and
Well,
monitored.
it's funny that the two most dangerous drugs are the only legal ones because I think if you put the kind of the figures on deaths and things like that with alcohol and cigarettes and then put all the other drugs together and these two legal ones still outweigh that by fathoms.
Absolutely.
And I
Mhm.
think so when I was younger, I mean, and as I say, we dabbled in different drugs and well, obviously with alcohol as well. But when I went back to university when I was in my 30s, and obviously I was kind of, my peers at that point were in their like 18, 19, 20. And I could not believe just how many of them were actually trying and experimenting with drugs compared to like 10 years previous when, I'd been at college before. And there was only a handful of us that were kind of messing about with that kind of thing. So I think people, because I don't know whether it's the glamorization of it or they want to experiment and they think, well, you know what, everyone's doing it. It's maybe that, or they think it's safer. Maybe they've done their research. So, as you say, people are still going to do it, and I think a lot more people are trying it. But it's a case of it's okay to experiment, and I'm not saying it's okay. I'm not kind of condoning it, but I think if it's just like where it's not become a dependency, if you do that at university and then you get on with the rest of your life, then that's fine. But when it becomes an actual issue. And it's the same with alcohol, you can experiment when you're younger and then a lot of people don't develop, dependency on it, but a lot do.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's it really. Most people, particularly when you're younger, it's a kind of rites of passage thing. You will experiment,
Hmm.
you'll try things, but most grow out of it. Majority do. A few will remain having a bit of an issue with it. So how do we make it safer then for people? How do we stop these drug-related deaths? How do we stop getting people trapped in the criminal justice system and having their lives, irrevocably changed because, they've made that wrong decision in their youth and now they
Hmm.
can't, they could, that, how many lives have been, turned into a different direction because they ended up in the courts, because they got involved in drugs in their youth, and they could have been a surgeon, they could have been,
Yeah,
a lawyer,
yeah,
how many lives took the wrong direction. So, we just need a complete rethink about how we deal with this.
yeah.
And then if it was legal, or lots of it was legal, then that money could be plowed into treatment, plowed into education, plowed into research,
Hmm.
helping people who do unfortunately end up. But we do need to have a different dialogue and discourse about drugs.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen in my lifetime, I don't think. I hope it starts to happen, though, over the next sort of 50 years that we move away from this because we're just making a lot of people very wealthy in Colombia and places like that, aren't we? And
Absolutely.
organized crime gangs and,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fueling
And
the
and
world.
as I say, they're not the ones that are doing all the work. They're just reaping the
Yeah,
benefits. I
yeah.
remember in Amsterdam, and I think it's only cannabis that's legal over there now. I mean, it might be different that they've decriminalized a lot of them, but I remember, and this was in the 90s, that you could take your ecstasy tablet at the nightclub and have a tiny little bit shaved off of the side of it, and they could test it there before you went into the club, before you tried it, and they would tell you whether it was rat poison or whatever else it was. And they would not allow that in this country. And I think that's still the same now. And it's like all they're trying to do is save people's lives.
There's a couple of organizations that do it.
Hmm.
So they go to festivals and things. So there's a company called The Loop that go to festivals.
Hmm.
I think it's Wedos in Wales. And if you've got a substance and you want to get it checked out, you can send it to them and they will check it out and they'll post the results online. So if there is something dodgy out there that's likely to cause, overdoses,
Hmm.
the results will be online. So you'll know, for example, say that in Liverpool there's a really bad batch of heroin or something, and it's free as well. You just send it off. So that is
That's good.
slowly starting to improve as well. Yeah, there's a couple of places that do it. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. I mean, it is, little by little, they are starting to kind of allow these things to kind of happen, I suppose. And it is good because and like what you're saying about people that are young and they've gone to prison, they've got a good head on their shoulders, but they're going to learn the trade in there because they feel like, society's just throwing the book at them. So what else are they
It
going to
turns
do?
their life in a different direction.
Yeah, yeah. And that's
Absolutely.
not what we want, is it?
No, not at all. I think I'm not condoning use. I'm a harm
No.
reductionist, so I just want to make it safer for people
Yeah.
because I know that people will use, and therefore,
Exactly, because you're not seeing any, like, oh, we've changed this policy by the government, and then it's like you're not seeing a massive drop. You're just seeing it increasing or whatever, but you're obviously there to help people and you want to be able to help in an increased, drug usage society. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So what would you say was the kind of most challenging part of your job there?
Um, Actually, it's a really rewarding job.
Yeah.
I've been blessed. I really have. I've met some amazing people.
Hmm.
I've seen some amazing recovery stories, people that have come back from such trauma and hardship, and the lives that they've lived, and yet they can, climb to the other side. And it's been incredible. I've seen people I've known over the
Hmm.
years, what's challenging about it. A charity, working for a charity, there have been some lean years
Hmm.
uh, where funding is always an issue. And as a charity that works with this subject, we are the Cinderella, we're not as sexy as, and popular as animal charities and cancer charities. No disrespect to them, they do amazing jobs, but they get everything,
Yeah.
so we have to work doubly hard to fundraise because what we have Motiv8's really fortunate in that it has a partnership with Manx Care, a
Hmm.
strategic partnership, so it gets core funding. But lots of the little other services that we have, um, I mean, did you know, for example, that we do a scheme with the police, criminal justice project, and we're talking about, that side of things.
Hmm. Yeah, tell us about that.
Motivate, and you'll speak to one of our workers who's got the lived experience and you'll get that option of having that chat confidentially, and then you go on your way and you don't get a criminal record. The charity pays for that.
Wow.
Charity fund pays for it. It doesn't get funded by anybody else. The charity funding, the donations that we receive, support our gambling service. This island is like really wealthy from the gambling sector,
Yeah, yeah.
um, but we don't have a statutory gambling service. So if we didn't have the good relations that we have with the sector on the island, the gaming sector, that service wouldn't exist. So those are the challenges.
Hmm. Hmm.
Work itself is a
Rewarding.
dream,
Yeah.
very rewarding. I've been blessed. I talk about it as I'm coming to the sort of the last few years of my career.
Mm.
I'm heading towards retirement. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be someone that's going to be sat gardening, I don't think,
No,
because
but I think you'll
do
still kind
something
of be,
else.
you'll still have your hand in Motivate. You'll still be, you know,
Yeah.
no,
I'll go back to more client work if I can,
right.
which
Right.
yeah, which is the best part of the job.
Yeah. But it's amazing, even in the last couple of years, when I've been doing a bit of, fundraising for Motivate as well. And when I mention to people, friends and that about Motivate, and they maybe don't even like. So it'll be maybe friends of my fiance Jen's, and it'll be like they might not have fully known about my history at that point, and then I'll tell them about, oh no, we know about Motivate or we've heard, and it's amazing, and I'm like, really, because I would think the only people would know about Motivate would be people that are service users or close to
Mm.
the service users that are using it, but actually no, so many people really know about Motivate, which I think is a fantastic place to be with the company
So
charity.
definitely, we've definitely boosted ourselves, and I think a lot of it is down to the fact that all roads lead to Motivate. Most
Yeah,
people end up there at some point or another. You know,
yeah,
it might be that, um, your nephew has ended up on the drug arrest referral scheme because he's been caught with a bit of weed.
yeah.
Or it might be that your child saw one of the workers in the school and got really benefited from, a really interactive education session.
Yeah.
Or
And
your
that's
brother.
it. We are a small island, but we all seem to kind of mix about. And unfortunately, there is a lot of
Yeah,
alcohol disorder and drug usage. So more often than not, people will know someone that's been involved with us. So
that's come to see the charity. That's right. Yeah. So
yeah.
you're at the beginning of your employment at Motiv8 now, so you'll start to see all of this as time goes on. The
Yeah, because
all as this is it. All roads lead to Motiv8. It's one of my favorite expressions
I love
because
it.
somebody ends up there at some point.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
and
just
it's great because
group.
I was only touching the surface when going to Smart and obviously the other groups and things. So it was an eye opener for me. And but as you say, I'm only just touching the surface of it now. So to be in from the other side of the door kind of really is it's been rewarding, even the two groups that we've done already, which I love. So where do you? I mean, obviously the peer mentoring aspect of it is fantastic. And are you wanting to kind of grow that, or are you going to see where it's going with the groups that you've got at the moment? Or
Yeah, I think it's a new venture and it's really
Mhm.
exciting. So I think it's got the potential to grow. What's next for Motiv8? I think we have to look at next generation
Mhm.
because if you look at today, they're all on their social media. They don't really want to do the traditional come for support, meet a counselor type thing. So I think we're going digital. We're going
Yeah.
to become more online presence, opportunities to meet online, opportunities to chat online, to get support in modern ways.
Mhm.
So that's the next phase for Motiv8, I think. Um, and that can involve anybody who works in the team, peer mentors, could be running chat groups online.
Yeah.
Uh, we always have to keep ahead.
Keep
You
ahead.
never have to keep up with because drug trends change so much, and you never know what's going to be the next craze and what's going to happen.
Mhm.
We have to constantly evolve, and I see that the next generation, if we want to engage with them, we've got to engage with them in their methods, and we can't expect them to pick up the telephone and say, "Hello, I need
Yeah.
some help."
On the
It's not
landline,
going to
like
happen.
what?
It's not
Yeah.
going to happen. No, it's not going to happen. So we just have to keep evolving.
Yeah.
Um, and then that will be my kind of um my last kind of piece of big work, I think, is that adapting to that new way of working. I'm not saying the old way is going to go, it isn't. There'll always be
No.
demand for it, but this is just something more. We have to become more digital, more online presence.
It
Mm.
makes sense because I mean, I don't think anything will kind of beat going into the rooms, into the meetings, but and the one-to-one, IRL in real life. But as you say, a lot of young people are kind of, going online and wanting to do chats like this, because I see a lot of people on Instagram that are, they're life coaches or they're sober coaches and this, that, and the other. And they'll all do it from their home. They'll just have people, kind of do a face-to-face on a Zoom call and they'll, give them an hour or two and they do it that way. So yeah, I think that's a fantastic kind of
Mhm.
progress for Motivate to be getting involved in that.
Yeah, yeah, that's the next big thing. Yeah.
Mhm. And I suppose it helps as well. Obviously, that the counselors and things would need to be prepared to work different hours. But I think for some people that might not be able to do the 9 to 5, face to face in the office, then it's a no-brainer to do it online later on or whatever. Yeah.
Well, we'll start slow. We'll start off with some things and then move on to, you know, um, more kind of out of hours stuff. If it
Yeah.
works, it will work. I know it will because it's just going to be. You have to just take youth culture isn't. the same as the generations that we're encountering at the moment. They
Mhm.
want it online, you know. That's
Yeah,
their choice, their medium of choice to have conversations,
yeah, yeah.
want them to
Everything,
be brief.
everything's.
They want them to be brief. They don't want anything long, and they want it to be snappy. So,
They want it to
um,
be TikTok length. That's it, and it's.
that's it.
But
Basically, yeah.
also, I've spoken to a few people, and I do think the younger people, they don't seem to be going back to drinking again as much because I think they're all very aware of being filmed. You know, they don't want things to be documented if they're doing something silly. You know, like back in the day when I was doing silly things when I was in my teens drinking, there was no one filming it, you know, so I could get away with it or just laugh it off, brush it off. But now if it's filmed, then that's there. That's caught on camera.
Scary, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah. So I
quite
think
scary. Um, Sort of trend that we have today is, young people being exploited in that sense as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, because
Used.
that's it. It's not just a couple of mates going, "Oh, look at what you did. We'll share this." They're wanting to put that online and really name and shame people, which is
Yeah.
it's
Excuse me.
cyberbullying, isn't it? So,
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's a good aspect that that's happening, but I'm saying if it is stopping people getting silly drunk and losing control, then that's a kind of better aspect of it, that they are being a bit more mindful of making, getting out of control. Yeah.
yeah. Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, what would you give to people, advisory on like if someone was thinking like listening to this and they're kind of sober curious, maybe just starting out on a kind of recovery journey, what advice would you kind of want to give them?
Starting out on their recovery journey or just thinking about it.
Just thinking about it, sober curious. Maybe they don't have as big a problem as I did, but they're kind of thinking it's got a negative impact on my life, so I maybe want to.
Well, we're very good at minimizing things, aren't we?
Mm,
Um, and so, just off the top of my head, I use the four L's, or sometimes it's the five L's, and now I've got to try and remember what they are. I'm a woman of a certain age, and my memory isn't good, and it's quite late, but I'll try. So, I ask people to think about. So it's a kind of it's a kind of like it represents different aspects of your life. The four L's.
hmm
So the first one is your liver, and the L for liver represents your liver, but it's your health. So how is the substance impacting your health? So you like people to get people to try and think holistically about, um, you know, how how are they feeling in themselves? Have they are they starting to worry about whether it's affecting their heart or their liver, or
hmm
have they noticed other things that are, like maybe they think they've got high blood pressure or something. So it's a holistic thing. So the L is representative of your of liver, but it represents your whole health.
hmm
And I ask people to think about lover, and lover represents your relationships. So it
hmm
represents not just your relationship with your partner, but it could be relationships with your children, with your friends, with your family. Is the substance impacting those things? you know. And then I ask people to think about their livelihood. There's the third L.
hmm
And, has it affected their work? Is it affecting their schoolwork? Is it affecting their responsibilities? You know, has it made financial differences to them or, job losses, anything? And then get them to think about the law. Has it impacted them in terms of the legalities of it? If they got into trouble, drink driving, drug-related arrests,
hmm
drug and disorderly, those sorts of things. So if people, and generally if people are probably listening to this podcast,
hmm
they are thinking around those lines, aren't they?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
think about all of those things. And if they're ticking one or two of those, then it's likely that potentially they may have an issue. Now,
Mm.
there are, the expression alcoholic doesn't fit everybody, but you
No.
can have alcohol problems. You can be somebody that can have a series of alcohol problems, but you might be someone that might go for a few weeks and not drink, and then suddenly when you do drink, everything seems to go a bit, chaotic for you.
Hmm.
So if you ask yourself those questions, think of the four L's. I sometimes like to add another L, which is the fifth L, which is loss. What
Right.
have you lost? What's it made you lose, in terms of, relationships, possessions, have you, been and, sold down one of those shops in Strand Street? Have you been down and sold your PlayStation because you wanted to go and buy something with it?
Yeah.
So what's it made you lose? Has it made you lose a friend? Has it made you lose possessions? Has it made you lose your dignity, your pride? You know, um, the liver one also represents your mental health as well, and
Mm.
not just your physical health, but your, you know,
Well-being.
people who drink or use drugs, they're always depressed,
Mm.
suffering from anxiety, and it's the substance that causes that. The
Mm.
substance takes away people's confidence. It takes away people's ability to function. Even in small quantities, people can be impacted. Makes
Yeah.
people paranoid. That everyone I've ever seen at Motiv8 who's got an alcohol problem is depressed,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not many are still left with that depression after they've stopped drinking for a period of time. They feel so much better in themselves, and those that don't, they've obviously got clinical depression and they need some help with that.
Yeah. They need a bit more deeper help. I mean, one of my questions with all the other podcasts is, do you regret getting sober? And not a single one has said no, which, is a kind of no-brainer. Of course, they're not going to say, yes, I regret it, because that's just the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've heard people come up with some great expressions and quotes, but one that sticks with me is, you can do absolutely anything now. You're trapped when you're in the midst of addiction with a substance. But
Yeah.
when you stop it, you can do anything in the world, The only thing you can't do is drink, but you can do
Yeah.
anything else. And I love that because it just makes people feel free,
Yeah.
you
But it's funny because when you have people that drink question people that are giving up, and they're going, well, what are you going to do now that you don't
know.
drink? And it's like, I'm going to do everything else. I've now got the freedom to do everything else, and I'm not going to be stuck in a bar at 10 o'clock on a Friday night and thinking, oh, I've got stuff to do tomorrow and I'm going to be hanging. So, yeah.
I've not met one person who had a problem who came in and said, "This is great. I'm loving this." Is not a problem at all.
Yeah.
They will recount to you endless misery of the things that have gone wrong,
Yeah.
but then they are still fearful of giving up the substance.
Hmm.
But you can kind of understand it because when you're in the thick of it, you just don't think you can cope without it, you know.
We're, we're,
And
we're,
once
we're, we've almost kind of been, I don't know if indoctrined is the right word, but society kind of, well, my generation is, we had the 90s, the ladette culture, and it was
yeah,
growing up. So we all learned to socialize with alcohol. So to then take that away makes it very difficult to go out and do that without having anxiety or anything to socialize with these people. And, I'm
yeah.
still learning. I'm still learning because I don't go out as much as I used to, but I do still force myself to go out to certain, occasions. But I'd rather meet my friends in a coffee shop and have a quiet drink rather than bellowing across a table when I
Yeah.
can't hear people speaking. Uh,
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that is again quite much more acceptable today, isn't it? We've got some nice one thing that has happened on the island. I've got quite a few nice coffee houses that have popped up, haven't we?
yeah,
Where they
yeah,
are open in the evenings. You can go and have coffee and a meal and
yeah.
just chat to people, and you're not stared at as much anymore. It's acceptable to do that now.
It really
Yeah.
is. Like Windsor's great, down above paparazzi. So after, like Smart or whatever, I'll go down there with a few people and we'll just have a chat. And it's, because you might not want to go home straight away, but if all the cafes are shut at 5 o'clock, then it's like, But I think there needs to be more like sober places for people to go and kind of meet up, because we don't want to go home sometimes, but we don't want to go to these bars and towns that
Bars.
I won't mention their names. So yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much, Thea. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of add to the end of that,
No,
or?
I don't think so. No, did I tell you I've just wrote a book?
Oh God, yes. Sorry, I did. That's in my notes, but we've just had a flow. So tell us about the book. Sorry, Thea.
Yeah, so it's about the subject.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just feel like, again, as I say, I was studying, I've studied for a lot of my life.
Hmm.
And when I stopped studying, I thought I can't keep studying. So I was missing writing.
Right.
I thought, well, I'll give it a go and I'll start to write about the subject. So I just wrote a book as I've called it The Memoirs of an Addictions Counselor, and what I've learnt
Hmm.
and what I think causes addiction and what I think helps people to recover. So it's just and it was great just to write for the sake of writing rather than having to fact check and look for a quote and do it in that sort of methodical studying way that you have to do when you're writing assignments and essays.
Bibliography and all that. Yeah. Yeah.
It was lovely just to be free to write and just to say what I wanted to say. So I just felt like I needed to put it down. It's not everything that I've learned because I've discovered I wanted to keep it to 50,000 words and I was going way over that. So I've clipped it a bit now.
Hmm.
I feel like there's another book in me yet after this one. This one's done now.
Now you've
Um,
opened the floodgates, Thea. This will be it. You'll
yeah.
be,
Well, I'll
the
be
number
missing
one
it now.
bestseller.
I'll be missing it.
So,
So,
memoirs of an
Memoirs of an Addictions Counselor.
addictions counselor.
Yeah.
And is that going to be coming out anytime soon?
Yeah, very soon. Yeah, very
Right.
soon.
And
Um,
are you gonna grace us with an Audible version? Because I do read, but I listen to a lot of Audible books as well. So are you gonna get in the studio
what
and
does that
record it?
mean? Do I have to speak it?
You can speak it, or you could get someone to speak it for you, but I think that would cost more money, so it's probably best that you speak it. So I think from hearing from people, it would take, depending on how many hours you do the recording
Chapter
in,
nine.
you could do it, yeah, you could do it in a couple of nights or do it in a day or whatever. But
Maybe. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because
Maybe.
yeah, and then get it on Audible, and then because as I say, it's easier for me to listen to books while I'm
Mm.
working because I'm just getting on with the gardening, and I can smash through about 4 books a week sometimes. So yeah, it's quite a good way of reading.
Maybe. I used to listen to Audible books myself when I was younger, but now I'm kind of like um I just get back to reading books again when I can.
Yeah,
You know, but
yeah.
when you've studied a lot though, it does put you off reading quite a bit.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, I do you know what I used to try and read, but when I was in full blown addiction, it was not really something that I would do because I wouldn't be taking any of it in. But since getting sober and in recovery, I'm really just, voracious reader now. I love it, and I'll buy, I'll tend if I really enjoy an Audible book, I'll buy the actual book as well, so that I've got it in my bookcase and I'll read it and reread it. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to do it because I just felt like, sometimes you feel like what you've learned over the years, and my memory doesn't always work as well as it used to. So I wanted to put down what I could,
yeah.
and it's like it's there for anyone who wants to know more about the subject. It's there for people that are starting to work in the field,
Hmm.
kind of a reference book as well. And it's also there for family members as well to understand. There's a big chapter for family members. So and done a little bit of a kind of all the sort of there's an awful lot of recovery gurus around nowadays and people that are coming up with their try my 5-step program and you will be cured and
Yeah.
pay me this amount and huge amount of money, and they've all retired now to the south of France, these people,
Mhm.
uh, with all the rich pickings that they've got from all of their wonder cures, and they've all got these, wonderful therapeutic names, in these magical therapies. But actually, all you need to do is to go back to the Godfathers. You
Mhm.
go back to Stoicism. You go back to the original things like DBT and CBT. I know they're new wave therapies, but you can pick it all up online for free.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um, going back to the classics,
Hmm.
um, and helping people, rational emotional behavioral therapy, things like that. Looking at SMART, looking at mutual aid,
Hmm.
finding your tribe. That really works. We know it does, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Um, so getting people to consider that there's lots of ways that you can get well, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. And just breaking it all down really. So I've really enjoyed doing it. It's given me a thirst to write more. Um, it's something I will do more of, I think, in my as I slow down into my retirement years.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to getting a copy and having a read of that. To say I'm trying to work on one at the moment, but I've got so many other things going on at the moment that it's kind of taken a back seat. But yeah, I will get back to it at some point. But yeah, thank you so much, Thea. It's been an absolute pleasure having a
Thank you,
conversation
Jimmy. I've
with you
enjoyed it.
tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I must
Um,
listen to your other podcasts as well. What are they called?
yeah. What's
What's
that?
it called? What's it
It,
called, the
it's called
series?
After Hours with Jimmy Thistle.
Timmy Thistle. Okay.
Um, I'll send you a link. So our very own Jo is on the first episode, so she can
Okay.
help me do the first one. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. Oh
How
well,
many have
I
you done?
won't. What's that?
How many have you done?
So I've done. This is number 12.
I
So I've
thought
got
you were
10. I've got 10 out. What's that?
I'm looking for some.
Unlucky for some, yeah. So I've got there's 10 episodes available, but I recorded one tonight before you, and
All
then this
right.
one. So yeah, so there's a few kind of in the back
Gosh, you're
burner,
on a
and then
roll.
yeah. So and it's only been going since 28th of January. So
You're enjoying it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. It's developing as it goes, and it's just getting interesting people in. We've had. One of my guests, Kate Turner, she had a problem with alcohol, and she explained during it that her parents were heroin addicts while she was growing up, and they kicked the habit when she was 6. Her dad listened to her episode, and then he mentioned that he might want to come on. So I had a great chat with Martin, who is he's I think he's early 70s, and he was explaining all about his kind of his childhood and then his heroin addiction as well. So it's really interesting, just really interesting people, but normal people, day-to-day people. It's not like, I'm getting celebrities or anything like that on. So it's just this is who people want to hear from, I think. And also,
Yeah.
my kind of main issue was uh I mean, I was probably one of the, maybe not the worst, but like I was a really bad case with my alcoholism and my alcohol use disorder. But there's a lot of people on the podcast that are maybe gray area drinkers, or they've just had a little bit of a negative impact. And that's the kind of ones that I want to kind of focus in. I want to focus on them all, but I think it's interesting to show people that you don't have to be as bad as me for it to be an issue. If it's having a
Yeah.
negative impact on your life, then do something about it.
Problem. Yeah, absolutely. There are
Yeah.
many people out there that function and go about their business, and they have problems with substances,
Yeah.
and some have it to a greater degree than others, but it's what it's costing you.
Yeah.
Ask yourself what it's costing you. That's the main thing. And if it's costing you anything, whether it's days off work, whether your partner keeps complaining about it, whether your children aren't being taken to clubs at night because you need to crack open that bottle, it's a
Mm.
problem,
Yeah.
you know. And it doesn't mean you rip roaring type, Father Jack type character, you know.
Absolutely.
They're,
Yeah.
they're they're actually only about 3 to 5% of the
Yeah.
population,
Yeah, exactly. And that's
but
it. And it's
25% have got problems with it per se.
yeah. And
And
the thing is, it's not, if there is a bit of an issue there and it's causing negative impact, it's only going to get worse. And
yeah,
that's the kind of thing. There is obviously people that can moderate, and they can be brought back from the brink and learn to moderate it, and I get that as well.
yeah,
But it's just learning when to kind of say, right, there is a bit of an issue here. I need to do something about this. And I would not have been able to do this on my own. I mean, I'm obviously always going to be forever grateful to you guys and Motivate. But it's learning to know that you can ask for help. You don't
yeah.
have to just hide and not speak
Do
up
it
about it.
yourself.
Hmm?
Everybody does it themselves at the end.
They
We're
do,
just
they do, but they need
yeah,
a little bit of a help. And
a bit
and
of a
not just
share.
that, to know they're not alone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But ultimately, people change because it becomes too difficult to stay the same,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they have to propel themselves to the next stage. And that's what you did. You were sick of it, and you wanted to move away from it, didn't you?
Yeah. But it's
Yeah,
crazy because we talk about this in the meetings, and it's like I was thinking, oh, it's so hard to give up and I can't do it and it's so difficult. But the effort that I was putting into to drinking and maintaining the drinking lifestyle that I had. It was so much hard work. So this is much easier. You know, got a lovely little life and it's all great. Oh, I
It's
think
gone.
oh, are you there?
Disappeared for a second.
Yeah, sorry. I think we've just kind of I think all of our internets are getting tired at the end of the day. Right, Thea, let's call
Okay,
it a
let's
night
call
there
it a
then.
day. All
Thank
right
you
then,
so
Jimmy. Thank you
much.
very much. Take
Much
care. See you
appreciated.
soon.
See you soon. Cheers, Thea. Bye.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.
Yeah, that was Thea. Yeah, really interesting chat with Thea. It was lovely to get her on the podcast, and yeah, just to hear her kind of sided point of view from working in the charity that helps people with drug, alcohol, gambling, all types of dependencies. So you can find Motiv8. I'll put this in the show notes. You can find Motiv8 at Motiv8. That's 8, the number 8.im. So Motiv8 with the number 8.im. And I've also put information with regards to the ketamine bladder, affliction that happens to people that are taking ketamine. So it's a really interesting article on the BBC. So I've put that in the show notes. Yeah, just thank you so much to Thea for giving up her time and for coming on the show. I think it's a really great conversation, and yeah, just to hear it from a different point of view. So thank you again, Thea, and yeah, we'll see you soon. So yeah, we're coming up to, we're in March now. And I do a thing called, you might have heard it on a few of the other podcasts or just one, but I've mentioned it on my Instagram many times. It's been going over a year now, so it's called Sober Seasons, and what it is it's 3 months. So I do it from the solstice or the equinox. The first one was 21st of December to the 21st of March, which was not last year, the year before, 2023. So now this has been the second sober winter, and that will be finishing on the 21st of March. But as it finishes, the same day, it starts up to be sober spring. So again, it's another 90-day-ish kind of sobriety challenge or test, or, if you are really struggling, it's a great way to kind of get past the kind of just the standard kind of month, dry January or Stoptober, whatever it is. But it's a great way to, the 3 months is the real where the magic starts, the magic happens on just getting your body back without alcohol or drugs in your system. Obviously you get a lot of improvements over a month, but it really starts to take shape after 3 months. You do start to see the difference. So if anyone is interested in signing up to that, it's in my link tree on my Instagram, but I'll put this link in the show notes as well. It's on Facebook. We've got over 100 people in there now, so it's still early days, but it's a great little source of support and community for people that are really trying to give up alcohol for a short period of time, or some have given it up for the 3 months and they've seen the difference, and it's spurred them on to go even longer. So yeah, so get involved. But yeah, until next time, stay safe, stay sober, and stay supportive. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.